people writing any fiction book, right? You'd think it was not as much research as a nonfiction book, but in reality, it can be just as much research or more, depending on how realistic and convincing and accurate you wish your story to be in the context in which it takes place. So I wanted to make it as accurate as possible to the time period based on what we know about the time period. So I did spend a huge amount of time researching it, even little minute details that nobody would probably ever notice, down to the breed of horse, that the main character rides. Was that existent in that period of time in that area of the world? Was this plant known to these people? Was this food eaten then? Did they drink out of cups or chalices or bowls? What was it made out of? I tried to make every single component as accurate and realistic as could possibly be. So it's very important to me to answer your question in short.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have an author on today that's got something pretty unique for you, something I've never heard from another author on the show, and we have like 300 episodes, so there you go. If that doesn't set the bar high, I don't know what else we can do. J.F. Hughes is with us today, and he has an interesting book that has a nice addition that goes along with it. We're going to get into it in the podcast. J.F. Hughes, welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Thank you, Dave. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's exciting to have you on the show, and I think we got a nice tease there at the beginning. We're going to get into that in a second. Let everybody know, first of all, where you are in this big world of ours.
Currently, I'm in Somerset County, New Jersey, central New Jersey. It's a beautiful fall day right now, so lovely weather. Couldn't ask for anything better right now here in this is my world.
My wife's favorite time of year. She's just like, oh, the leaves are changing. She's doing the pumpkin and everything. Hey, right? It's fall. So
it's one of the best parts about the Northeast of the United States here. So is the fall season, that's for sure.
Nice. Okay, so you're an author, which is amazing. Your book is coming out October 24th. Is that right?
That is right.
Wow. Okay, so what does it feel like to know you're this close to release day on your book? It's just a few days away from the time we're recording. How does it feel to know it's this close to being out there in the world?
It's a relief, quite honestly. There's a lot of writing the story seems to be the easier part once you go through all the nuances of formatting and copy editing and publishing and all of the nitty gritty legwork that goes into it. So it's a lot of effort, a lot of coordination, a lot of checking, rechecking, triple checking. So it can get pretty stressful. You have a set date where it's coming out. You want to make sure everything's perfect, of course. But I'd have to say that the overall feeling is definitely relief
Nice.
that we're at the finish line here.
Good. Well, that's the one thing I've always heard from authors is their book release date. They feel like, great, I've done it. I've crossed the finish line. I can rest. And then it's like, oh, now I have to get out and talk about my book.
Yeah.
It's like a new race begins right where the last one ends.
That's
and you're like,
true.
You don't even get a break. You're like, oh, here we go again. And the gun goes off and you're ready to go. So talk a little bit about some of the promotion that you're doing around the book. You're on a podcast, which is amazing.
Yeah.
What else do you have planned?
I've got a lot of bloggers, a lot of Instagram accounts focused on books, a couple legacy type print media outlets local to New Jersey going to pick it up. A couple things like that. Advertising on a couple very specific podcasts relating to the content of the book, specifically history podcasts. So we'll see. And then word of mouth, of course, is always good because nothing holds weight like a book recommendation from somebody you know, right?
Right. That's yeah. And there's so many ways that you can do this promo stuff. And I know I've been talking about setting this all up through Catherine over at CK Publicity, and she's amazing. First of all, I just want to say every time she sends me a guest, top shelf, like the best guests come from her. So every time I see one pop up, I'm like, yours came in, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a home run. It's easy. So what's it like having somebody work with you to kind of help do the promotion Does it give you value as an author?
It certainly does. It's Kat's wonderful. She's very hardworking, very, very easy to work with. And she gets a lot of results. So I can't recommend Kat enough. And what it makes you realize is that there's no way I would have been able to achieve the same results as her. It's her business. She's a professional. And the author really should be focusing on, again, the nitty gritty details of the publishing process and making sure the finished product is good enough. And really, there shouldn't be that much extra time to be able to do all the publicity yourself. And I'm glad I went with her. She's phenomenal. That's Kat Kennedy. It's CK City. And I highly recommend her to any authors listening that are looking for a publicist. She's very professional, very talented.
Yeah. And the thing is, as authors and content creators, speaking for myself, we know what we know, but we don't know what we don't know. And it's kind of nice to have a professional come in and walk with us and think for us when we're like, oh, I need to do the thing. I didn't know I had to do the thing.
Yes.
And they just seem to have a whole plan. That's great.
And especially in the digital realm, these things change on a monthly basis. What software, what program, what outlets, what platforms. It's you need somebody who's really got their finger on the pulse of the industry to help you, I guess, maximize your exposure. So
it's amazing. Now, some of my audience that listens to the Living the Next Chapter podcast are new authors, and they're in the process of writing. They're not here at the finish line like you are. They're just at the beginning stages. Any words of wisdom from your perspective now that you're an author? It's kind of amazing. So what would you say to somebody just starting out on writing their book and they don't see this day coming for a long time because they're at the beginning of the stage?
Yes. If I would say, in regards to becoming a published author, start your publication process simultaneously with writing the book. It's going to require a lot of research, a lot of familiarizing yourself with whether it's Amazon or Ingram Spark or whatever programs or methods you're going to use to publish your book. Familiarize yourself with the editing process, with the publicity process, so you can start crossing some of the things off the to-do list while you're still writing, because the writing process is going to go all the way up to the end with the edits, the re-edits. Even as you're giving out your advanced copies, somebody's going to find the typo. It never fails. And you're going to be sure that it's not there, but somebody's going to find it. So the writing process is not the bulk of the work. It might be the most rewarding or the most enjoyable. And it might be what you're best at, but it's certainly not the only piece of the puzzle. And you need to really begin familiarizing yourself with that, because most writers have been writing their whole lives, or at least had a casual interest in writing and have written many things prior to attempting to publish something. So you've got a head start on the skill set involved in writing, but the skill set you need for publishing is quite different, and few people have that. So I would recommend putting a lot of time into that now rather than waiting till you get closer to the finish line. So
nice. I would anticipate that writing a book is a journey, and you start off as one person when you begin writing, and over the period of writing, you become something else. Like you get new talents, new abilities, use new insight. You're different than you were when you started. How are you different now as a published author?
I'm a little more tired, but but that's okay. It's a good problem to have. So I in addition to having the skill set for publishing, I have all the knowledge of the research I did for the book. I have the insights that come from that. I have the feedback from the readers, the encouragement from a lot of the advanced readers. So it's a good confidence booster. And I don't know, it feels, once you have something concrete to show at the end of it, it feels a lot different than just having a lot of things written, but nobody to read them. So I'm just very excited to get to the point where I get the general public's feedback on this work. So.
Good stuff. Okay, let's talk about the book. We've talked about all the things that go up to leading into the book and that part of your journey. Time to focus on the book and our little tease we did at the beginning. There's something very special about your book, and there's a resource that's accompany your book, and I just love the idea of this. So let's first talk about the name of the book and a little bit about the story of the book, and let's slide into that little tease that we gave at the beginning about what's so unique about your writing.
So the book is titled "The Gardens of Byzantium." Byzantium referring to the ancient name of Constantinople, now the city of Istanbul in Turkey. It takes place in the 7th century during a war between the Byzantine and Persian empires, and it follows two star-crossed lovers as they work their way through all of the vicissitudes of the war going on around them, and the fact that one of them is from Rome or from the Eastern Roman Empire, and the other is a Persian, and it creates a nice context for such a story. It's a very interesting point in history. I loved this point in history, the 7th century, and that's the setting. And the added component is rather than just being a story, I've included a musical accompaniment with a chapter by chapter, a selection of classical music to go along with the book. So I was partly inspired to write the book because I was reading about this era in history while listening to music, classical music, and it kind of seemed to fit together perfectly. So I wanted the readers to be able to share that experience and to experience what I experienced reading about the time and place, and then also hearing, the music going along with it. So that's available in the book. It's also available on the website along with the book itself. This is jfhbooks.com. And you can find a Spotify playlist, a YouTube playlist there that will have those selections that I chose for the one song per chapter. And I intend, hopefully, to solicit some song suggestions from readers as the book is released, to see if anybody has similar thoughts about what music goes with which scene, or different thoughts completely. I'm very curious about that, actually. But I think it makes it a more immersive experience, So
yeah, it's very interactive. I think of when my wife and I were talking, I was thinking of like your favorite restaurant, whether it's a Greek restaurant, Italian, whatever. You walk in and there's that ambiance to the restaurant. You haven't even sat down at your table yet, but you feel like you're in there, and there's something about that restaurant. There's the music. There's that in the behinds, right? Behind the scenes. And I could just picture that for your book, just that ambiance in the background as you're reading, to feel what you as an author were hoping to translate to us as readers by adding that element of music. I think it's a spectacular idea. Again, 300 episodes, I've never heard anybody mention this on my show as an idea. I think it's very unique.
Well, thank you. I'm a musician myself, and I've always heard the quote that all art aspires to the condition of music. And whatever it is about music itself, it resonates with everybody, and it can be associated with anything. It could be in the background of a restaurant, it could be during your drive, it could be during a movie. Music is essential in movies. And I figured, why not include it with a book as well, especially because as I was writing some of the scenes, I was picturing it almost like a movie. And I was like, well, a movie would have a soundtrack. What would be playing in the background of the scene if it was a movie? And that was kind of the impetus behind it. And I hope people can associate the music with the chapters like I was in my head. But again, it'll be different for everybody, and I'm really looking forward to the feedback from the readers themselves.
Did you actually have somebody like pre-read your book, like a beta reader or something?
Yeah, I've given out a lot of advanced copies. There's been people who I've asked to edit it before I sent it to the editor, which is
Yeah.
another good suggestion for all the authors out there. Have people who are proficient at this kind of thing. Just give it a once through, and you'll catch a lot of the errors you made before you send it to and pay for a professional editor, because you want to leave them to focus on the nitty gritty and the difficult edits. But I did have a lot of people read it. The feedback has been very good. I get a lot of comments on the playlist itself. A lot of people saying they wonder why people haven't done that before.
Yeah.
So it seems like overall very good news.
I like the idea of using or having beta readers help you, especially if they know you, because they kind of know your voice. They know you as a person to some degree. So they know how you present yourself, how you talk, and they can kind of hear your words when they're reading. So that's kind of cool if you can have somebody in your circle that knows you to some degree be part of your beta circle as well.
That's an excellent point, because somebody who knows you will also, because they know your voice, be able to point out something you've written that may not be interpreted the same way by people who don't know you. Right. So it gives you that kind of, I know what you meant, but I know that a reader is not going to know what you meant. So you should reword it or et cetera. So
it's amazing. So have you yourself tried reading through some of your chapters with the music in the background? Have you actually gone through the process yourself?
I have. I was, I spent a very large amount of time, sorting through which songs would go with which chapter. I actually, while I was writing some of the chapters or editing some of them, I would play that specific song in the background just to see if it fit. And, I went through certain pieces I knew were associated with certain chapters from the beginning, and they weren't going to change. But some of the chapters were, up in the air, and there was ones that fit, but not 100%. There was, pieces that fit because they started in a minor key, but later they became a major key, and that didn't fit with the with the feel of that particular chapter. So it was a lot of trial and error for a lot of it. But I think I came up with a good list, and I'll add alternative lists as we move forward. I anticipate doing that, an alternative set of songs for this book. So. Nice.
I can hear musicians speak while you're talking. Minor to a major and all that. People are like, what did he say? I hear music speak. I love it. That's amazing. What is your passion for the 7th century? Where does that come from? That's not like a common thing you hear around the table as, how was your day? I love the 7th century. Where does that come from? Well, why that particular century sticks with you?
I have a passion for history in general.
Okay.
But I became a little bit more fixated on the 7th century, specifically centered around the Eastern Roman Empire, because it's not a story or it's not an area of history you hear too much about. When I was in school, we learned about the fall of the Western Roman Empire, and then we kind of glossed over everything until you get to the Black Plague and the Middle Ages there. But there's this whole underappreciated era of history of the eastern half of the empire surviving against these incredible odds and just disaster after disaster befalling these people. And their entire culture centered around Constantinople and clinging to the cultural tradition that they inherited from their cousins in the western half of the empire, and being raided and besieged by all these enemies, plagues, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, famines, horrific situation, terrible odds. And it kind of culminates for me at the event that the book centers around, which is the siege of Constantinople in 626, where this Persian army is right at the gates of the city. and it's the walls of the city and just the Roman people behind it, between nothing standing between them and oblivion except for these walls and each other. And
Wow.
you read narratives of people who experienced it, or later historians, classical era historians who wrote about it. And the people in the city were really unified because they understood that there's no guarantee that their way of life or their city would continue. They knew exactly what they were facing. They understood that the western half of the empire had fallen, and if Rome can fall, right, mighty Rome, anybody can suffer the same fate. So they really were unified as a people during these sieges, and this one in particular is a pretty exciting narrative that I certainly didn't hear before until I started, studying it more in depth. So I wanted to also cover that era because so few people are aware of the events that took place. So.
How important is historical accuracy for your book? Are you really attention to detail? Is that really important to you in this story, or are you kind of taking liberty to kind of create and draft your own story around the events?
It's extremely important to me.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to do the actual story itself an injustice by editing a historical fact that I didn't need to. So the context, the events, and a lot of the characters that are mentioned but don't feature in the story are real people, real events, real timetables. But the main characters themselves, of course, are fictional, and they're kind of walking through this historically accurate world. And that also is one of the more time-consuming components. Even people writing any fiction book, right? You'd think it was not as much research as a nonfiction book, but in reality, it could be just as much research or more, depending on how realistic and convincing and accurate you wish your story to be in the context in which it takes place. So I wanted to make it as accurate as possible to the time period based on what we know about the time period. So I did spend a huge amount of time researching it, even little minute details that nobody would probably ever notice, down to the breed of horse, that the main character rides. Was that existent in that period of time in that area of the world? Was this plant known to these people? Was this food eaten then? Did they drink out of cups or chalices or bowls? What was it made out of? I tried to make every single component as accurate and realistic as could possibly be. So it's very important to me to answer your question in short.
I love it. Okay, so for the readers, this is a great. I can't wait for this answer. Can you describe to us more about the characters, the main characters that maybe we wouldn't know on chapter 1? Is there anything we need to know about these characters that might help us kind of get into the story sooner and embrace these characters right away?
Sure. I gotta be careful not to put any spoilers.
Yes.
In there.
Yes. Yeah.
So
yes.
the male character, the male lead, is a soldier in the Eastern Roman Empire who I envisioned as sort of an outcast, even though, but respected, but still an outcast within the Roman military structure. Kind of a little bit cynical, a little bit more introverted than the average soldier, so kind of stands out as a loner, who has a very strong moral compass or very strong honor code that both helps and hinders him and leads to some interesting situations. The female lead, the female protagonist, is the daughter of a Persian commander who kind of has her path set for her despite all her efforts, that kind of between the war and the events going on and the fact that she's Persian, finding herself in the Eastern Roman Empire, she's left with few options, but is a very pure of heart character. So she kind of represents, youthful blamelessness, where you're kind of growing up and becoming aware of the evils and the suffering in the world, but there's not much you can do about it, and it's not your fault. So her story kind of encapsulates what a noble person would do given a situation that is pretty terrible and is out of their control. And I think she's really the heroine of the story. Certainly the strongest argument could be made for her being the heroine and the main character. And that's as much as I think I can say without spoiling the plot points.
Yeah, no, that's good. The one thing I've heard from other authors is during the writing process, between you as the author and your characters in the story, there's a little bit of a dance going on between you and the story and your characters. And sometimes the characters seem to take the lead in the dance, where you're just you're on the journey with them and you're kind of feeling more of a passenger than the lead as the author. And did that happen at all during your writing, where your characters went a different direction than you were anticipating while you were writing?
It does. And it's an important thing to keep in mind. That's an excellent question, by the way. It's an important thing to keep in mind, because when you're writing fiction, I think there's a tendency or an innate desire to insert yourself into the story as far as what you would do, what you would say, what you would think, but you got to remind yourself as the author that these characters are not you, right? They're in many cases completely alien to you and your experience. What would a character in the 7th century have in relation to me? So right. It's important to really do the research enough to understand the lives that were lived at the time or place that you're writing, so that the character themselves can take on a life of their own and drive the car, to use your metaphor, because that's what you want. You want the character to develop as their own character. You don't want it to be, a mashup of this partially completed character overlaid with your own, the author's own personality traits or decision making. And then if that happens, it'll be very apparent to the reader, because your character will bleed through in all of the book's characters, and they'll all start seeming somewhat similar, or they'll have a similar thread. So it's kind of important to make sure each of the characters stands on their own as fully a developed character as you can possibly make it.
Okay, and so I'm not an author, so I'm asking out of complete ignorance, but I would probably, if I was writing a book similar to what you've done, I'd like to hide a little bit of Dave, a little bit of me in the story somewhere, even as like an adjacent character or somebody passes through on the street. I would like for me to kind of live in that world with who I am and who I am right now. I'd like to kind of implant myself in the story somewhere, maybe just in how their worldview or who they are, or that's an element of me I'd like to put into my writing. Is there any of you in the book at all?
Yes, I'd say so. But it ends up coming through as things I've thought or being spoken by one of the characters, or types of people I've met that become embodied in one of the characters, or sensations or scenes that when it happened to me was seemed very, very profound and powerful, and I wanted to describe it in some way. And so I place one of the characters in a similar scene so they can describe it in that way. It might be an idea that I wish I had a reason to share with somebody, but never had the opportunity. So you have one of the characters share that idea with another character. And then I'm sure, myself as the author comes through in the story in other ways that I'm not even aware of.
Right. Yeah.
Which is another, to go back to your earlier point, that's a good reason to have somebody in your circle read the book too. So
smart. Yeah. Okay. So I have one more question for you at the end here, JF. But before I do that, again, let's talk about the website and social media, because I think as I listen to this podcast episode and I get the book, I get the playlist, and I'm doing all the things, I can just anticipate people are going to want to reach out and go, what an amazing idea. Again, to go back to the playlist, to have that in the background as I'm reading. I just love this idea. So people want to reach out and contact you, have you on their podcast, whatever. Where do we go? Where are you most active on social media?
So I can be reached at info@jfhbooks.com. jfhbooks.com is also the website. It'll have links to the YouTube and Spotify playlist there, as well as the email address if you'd like to reach out to me. I have most of my social media presence on X, formerly Twitter, at jfhbooks.com. Try to keep it all uniform here.
Yeah, simple. Good.
I'd love to hear from anybody, particularly regarding the playlist, any feedback on that. The playlist can be found on Spotify and YouTube by searching for the Gardens of Byzantium. That's Byzantium, Byzantium. So again, jfhbooks.com will have all the links that you need for everything.
Awesome. Okay, I know the ink is not even dry on the book yet, but the name of my podcast is Living the Next Chapter. So I got to ask, I know, again, it's still fresh, it's still new. I want to celebrate this book. It's coming really soon. But I got to say, ask, what are you doing? How are you living your next chapter? What's next for you as a person, as an author? I know you're going to be promoting the book, but there's got to be something coming for you in the future that has your attention right now. How are you living your next chapter?
Well, I'd like, I'm writing the next book or books as we speak. It's daunting to start back over from square one, right as before I'm even technically at the finish line on this one. But I think it's prudent to do that, to be prepared in case people do love it and do find real value in it and want more. It's also kind of, necessary for me internally to continue writing, partly because there's ideas I wanted to include and didn't include in this book. So they have to get bumped into the next story. There's different eras in history I'd like to cover. There's different genres I'd like to write about. So, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. I have to keep writing. I'm just hoping that enough people will appreciate the product that can justify, spending such efforts, because it is a lot of work. It's not just writing the story. There's the publishing process, as we talked about, promoting it. So my next chapter seems to be more writing, more promotion, more publicity, more editing, more publishing. Nice. So
it's amazing. JF, thank you for doing this and being part of the show. I would love to keep the door open for you. I anticipate many, many great books coming in the future as well, on top of this one that's coming out on October 24th. So I'll keep the door open. I'll leave the seat empty for you. Come back anytime. Let's talk about the next chapter. And would love to keep that door open for you. Everyone, all the information, again, in the show notes. Head over to the website as well. All the links are there. Make sure that you really need to use the playlist on YouTube or Spotify, and do that when you're reading. Don't skip that part. I think it's really important that you do them together. There's a reason why. And I love the idea, JF, that as you wrote these chapters, that music was also the part of the creation of the chapter, not just the result of the chapter. I love the fact that they're all together. So what a unique idea. I can't stop talking about it. That's great.
Thank you. The music and the story definitely very intertwined. I think you'll get the most out of the book by doing by listening as you read. And again, I'm looking forward for anybody else's musical suggestions. The alternative playlists, I think, would be a great idea, and to see what readers think about how they fit together. But I want to thank you for having me on. It's great conversation, great questions, and I'm very excited to have this one cross the finish line. And I would love to come back on the next one. I'll be working on it today.
Excellent. And so again, one thing as well for everyone listening, when you buy the book, leave a great review wherever you buy it. Tell everybody about in your comments on the review. Make sure you don't just say great book, great author. That's nice, but let's go detail wise. Make sure you mention the playlist in your review. Also on Spotify and on YouTube, leave your likes and all that on there as well. It helps share the playlist that leads us back to the book through YouTube and Spotify. You can do that there as well. And that way everyone kind of gets tied back into the book and into the playlist. I would encourage everyone to do that. So again, all the information in the show notes. J.F. Hughes here on Living the Next Chapter. Thank you so much for making time to do this.
Thank you, Dave. My pleasure.
Thank you for checking out this episode of Living the Next Chapter. Did you know that we have more episodes than we can release? So, if you want to get the most recent episode of Living the Next Chapter and you want to jump the line, head over to our YouTube channel and make sure you subscribe, follow, ring the bell, whatever you need to do over there on YouTube, and you will get the most recent episodes of Living the Next Chapter way in advance of everyone else. Get the most recent episode of Living the Next Chapter right now. You can hear the episodes we recorded today, yesterday, right now on Living the Next Chapter's YouTube channel. I'd love to see you over there. Please share, tell the world. And we'll see you on our YouTube channel and check out the amazing authors coming up on Living the Next Chapter. Thanks for your support.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.